I never thought I'd be the kind of man to stumble into a moment that would shatter my world in an instant. But betrayal doesn't come with a warning. It sneaks in through the cracks of trust, settles into the shadows of routine, and waits for the perfect moment to strike. That moment came on an ordinary Thursday night. Lauren sat in the passenger seat of my car, her long fingers tapping rhythmically against the screen of her phone, her lips curling into the faintest of smiles. I should have been looking at the road, focusing on the hum of the engine as we drove home from dinner, but something in the way she was staring at her phone caught my attention. I glanced at the screen just as she tilted it ever so slightly, and fate, cruel and unforgiving, allowed me to see something I was never meant to see. A name, Ethan. Next to it, a red heart emoji. My fingers clenched around the steering wheel, my knuckles whitening under the pressure. I wasn't the type to jump to conclusions. After all, Ethan could be a colleague, a friend, maybe even a cousin I had forgotten about. But I knew my wife. I knew that in the 5 years we had been married, she had never once put a heart next to my name. Before I could fully process the implications, my phone vibrated in my pocket. Keeping one hand on the wheel, I pulled it out and glanced at the screen. An unknown number. A single text message. Hey man, you don't know me, but you need to check your wife's text with Ethan. I'm sorry. The blood drained from my face. My stomach twisted violently, nausea rising like a tidal wave. The world outside blurred, and for a moment, it felt like I was no longer in control of my own body. I must have slammed the brakes without realizing it, because the car behind us honked sharply, the sound jolting me back into reality. Lauren whipped her head toward me, her blue eyes wide with confusion. Adam, what the hell? She braced herself against the dashboard as the car rocked slightly from the abrupt stop. I barely heard her. My pulse roared in my ears. The message on my screen burned into my retinas like a brand, each letter searing into my mind. I turned my head slowly, my voice eerily calm despite the storm brewing inside me. Who is Ethan? It was just a name. A simple, harmless name. But when I said it out loud, I saw it, the flicker of panic in her eyes. It lasted barely a second, barely long enough for anyone else to notice. But I did. Her mouth opened, then closed. Too long of a pause. She was thinking, calculating, crafting a lie. What? She said finally. Not who. Not a casual, dismissive Ethan. Oh, he's just a friend. Just what? As if she needed time to decide what version of the truth she was about to spin. I gripped my phone tighter, my fingers trembling with restrained fury. Who the hell is Ethan? The silence between us thickened. The world outside, the traffic, the city lights, the distant hum of car engines, faded into the background. Lauren blinked. Once. Twice. Then she scoffed, shaking her head as if I had just accused her of something absurd. Are you serious right now? She said, tossing her phone into her lap and folding her arms defensively. Ethan is just a friend from work. Jesus, Adam. She was good. Too good. The way she rolled her eyes, the way she exhaled in exasperation, it was practiced. A performance perfected over time. But she had made a mistake. She didn't ask how I knew the name. That's what innocent people do. They ask, where did you hear that? Why are you even asking? Lauren didn't ask. She went straight to gaslighting me. I inhaled sharply, forcing my voice to remain steady. Unlock your phone. The smirk on her face vanished. Excuse me. You heard me, I said, my jaw tightening. If he's just a friend, unlock your phone and show me. Her fingers tightened around her phone, knuckles going pale. She didn't move, didn't blink. I watched her brain calculating again, weighing her options, deciding whether she could still talk her way out of this or if she needed a different approach. Then she smirked. A slow, deliberate smirk. And she turned her screen toward me. Oh no, she said, fake pouting. Looks like my battery's dead. I almost laughed out loud at the audacity. I had just seen her texting. The screen had been on 2 minutes ago. Give it to me, I demanded. Lauren clutched it to her chest. Wow, so this is what we're doing now? Snooping through each other's phones like insecure teenagers. She shook her head, clicking her tongue. I can't believe this. I wasn't playing this game. I pulled out my phone, my hands shaking as I scrolled to our shared phone plan account. I had never checked our call logs before. Until now. The records loaded. My stomach dropped. Ethan. Call after call. Every single day. Hours of conversations. Some late at night. Some in the middle of the day when she was at work. Hundreds of texts. More than she had ever sent me in our entire marriage. And then the final nail in the coffin. Hotel reservations. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. My fingers tingled. My vision blurred. I turned my head toward her, my throat tight, my voice barely above a whisper. That's all you have to say? Lauren exhaled shakily, slumping back against the seat. Then, in a voice so cold, so devoid of remorse, she muttered the words that shattered me completely. You weren't supposed to find out like this. Lauren's words settled between us like a grenade with the pin pulled. You weren't supposed to find out like this. Not Adam. I can explain. Not it's not what you think. Just a quiet admission wrapped in regret. Not for what she had done, but for the fact that she had been caught. I stared at her, waiting for the panic to set in, for her to backpedal, to beg, to cry. Instead, she ran a hand through her hair and let out a long, measured breath, as if she were preparing for an argument she had already rehearsed in her mind. The neon glow from the dashboard cast shadows over her face, making her look unfamiliar, like a stranger sitting beside me in the car I had driven her home in 100 times before. Adam, she started, her voice controlled, too smooth, like she was speaking to a child she had no patience for. You're being dramatic. Something inside me snapped. I had imagined this moment before, not because I ever expected Lauren to betray me, but because we all have that one nightmare scenario in our heads, the one we push down and ignore because it couldn't possibly happen to us. And yet, here I was, sitting next to my wife, holding evidence of her infidelity in the palm of my hand, while she looked at me like I was the one overreacting. Dramatic? I repeated, my voice eerily calm. Lauren, I just found out you've been sneaking around behind my back. You've been lying to me for, what, weeks? Months. I laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. And I'm the one being dramatic? She sighed, leaning her head back against the seat, closing her eyes like she was exhausted by the whole thing. Adam, I don't want to fight. I gripped the steering wheel, my nails digging into the leather. Oh, well, that's convenient. You don't want to fight? You think I want this? You think I wanted to be blindsided by some random text from a stranger telling me that my wife is cheating on me? She flinched. Just barely. But I saw it. She opened her eyes, tilting her head toward me, her gaze unreadable. Who sent you the message? I barked out another laugh, shaking my head. That's what you care about right now? Who sent the message? Not the fact that you're caught? Jesus, Lauren. She wet her lips, shifting in her seat, finally looking uncomfortable. I just need to know what's going on before you start making assumptions. Assumptions? I shot back, my voice rising. Lauren, I just checked our phone records. You've been on the phone with Ethan more than you've talked to me in the last year. I found hotel reservations. What exactly do you think I'm assuming? Her mask cracked for a split second. Then she rolled her shoulders back, her expression smoothing into something composed. I was going to tell you, she said, the words deliberate, carefully chosen. I turned my whole body toward her, gripping my phone so tightly my fingers ached. Oh, really? When, Lauren? When were you planning on telling me? After you were done screwing him? After you moved in with him? Or were you just going to wait until I found out some other way and then pretend it was all some big mistake? She pressed her fingers to her temples, inhaling deeply, as if she were the one who needed patience. It's not that simple, Adam. It is, I snapped. It's exactly that simple. You cheated on me. You lied to me. And now you're sitting here acting like I'm the one making a big deal out of your betrayal. She finally turned to face me fully, her blue eyes sharp now, the pretense of regret slipping away. What do you want me to say? She demanded. That I'm sorry? That it was a mistake? Would that make you feel better? I stared at her, my chest rising and falling with ragged breaths. I want the truth, Lauren. Her jaw tightened. She looked away, out the window, like the night outside offered an escape from the weight of my stare. It just happened, she said finally, her voice softer now, almost hesitant. I didn't plan for it. I didn't wake up one day and decide to hurt you. I let out a sharp breath, running a hand through my hair. Then why? She didn't answer right away. I could see the hesitation in her posture, the way she bit the inside of her cheek, debating how much to tell me. When she finally spoke, her voice was quieter. Because I felt invisible. I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head. Invisible? Are you kidding me? Lauren, I have bent over backwards for you. I've done everything to make you happy. You had everything, a husband who loved you, a home, a life people envy, and you threw it away for what? Some guy from work who made you feel seen? She swallowed hard, but didn't deny it. Something cold settled in my chest. How long? She didn't speak. Lauren, I warned, my voice low. She exhaled, staring down at her lap. Almost a year. I clenched my jaw so tightly it hurt. A year. 12 months of lies, of sneaking around, of sharing things with another man that she should have been sharing with me. I turned back toward the windshield, gripping the steering wheel with white-knuckled hands, my pulse pounding in my ears. Get out. She looked at me sharply. What? I didn't repeat myself. She hesitated, then shook her head. Adam, let's just get out. She stared at me for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then, finally, she unbuckled her seatbelt and pushed open the door. She stepped out into the night, her arms wrapped around herself as if the cold had just hit her for the first time. I watched her go, watched the woman I had once trusted more than anyone in the world walk away from the wreckage she had caused without looking back. And as I sat there, gripping the wheel so tightly my fingers ached, one thought settled in my mind with icy finality. This wasn't over. I sat in the car long after Lauren disappeared into the house, my mind a battlefield of memories and reality colliding like tectonic plates. The air inside felt suffocating, thick with the ghosts of conversations that now meant nothing. Almost a year. The words echoed in my skull, twisting like a knife. She had been lying to my face for nearly 12 months, waking up next to me every morning, kissing me goodnight, all while carrying on an affair like it was just another part of her routine. I should have gone inside, should have confronted her properly, demanded more answers. But something inside me stopped me. Maybe it was the weight of knowing that no answer she gave me would change what I had already seen with my own eyes. Maybe it was the realization that the woman I thought I knew, the one I had built a life with, didn't exist anymore. Or maybe, just maybe, it was the first stirrings of something colder, something sharper. A plan. I turned my phone over in my hands, staring at the screen. The unknown number that had warned me about Lauren was still there, the message sitting unopened like a loaded gun. I hovered over it, considering my next move, before finally typing a reply. Who are you? The message sent, and I waited. Seconds dragged into minutes. My foot tapped against the floor, my pulse hammering as I stared at the screen, willing it to light up. Then, finally, a response. Someone who thought he was the only one. My breath left me in a sharp exhale. Ethan? I typed back. A pause. Then, no. Something in my stomach twisted. Another one. I'm sorry, man. I didn't know she was married. I found out last week. She told me she was leaving you. That you two were already over. The casual ease with which Lauren had spun that lie nearly made me laugh. I could picture it now, the way she must have said it, soft and sad, maybe even throwing in a sigh for dramatic effect. It's been over for a while. I just haven't told him yet. A built-in excuse, a way to keep everything clean, to keep her fun from being tainted by something as inconvenient as guilt. I tightened my grip on the phone. How long? A moment passed before the reply came through. 6 months. The rage I had barely been keeping on a leash surged forward, hot and blinding. Tell me everything. Another pause, then. I will. But not over text. You deserve to hear it all. I hesitated. Meeting him felt like stepping into a reality I wasn't sure I was ready for. But what choice did I have? I wasn't going to sit in that house and let Lauren spin whatever half-baked story she thought would save her. I needed the truth. And I needed it from someone who had nothing left to lose. I typed quickly. Where? The response came almost immediately. Pier 17. Midnight. I checked the time. 11:06 p.m. Without another thought, I started the car. The docks were quiet when I arrived, the cold wind rolling off the water in sharp gusts that bit at my skin. I pulled into an empty lot, the glow of the street lamps casting long shadows against the worn pavement. A lone figure stood near the railing, hands in his jacket pockets, his posture tense. I stepped out, my heartbeat a steady, heavy drum against my ribs. As I approached, the man turned, and for the first time, I got a look at one of the people my wife had been betraying me with. He was younger than I expected. Mid-30s, maybe. Athletic build, dark hair slightly tousled by the wind. He looked like the kind of guy who spent his free time at the gym, someone who knew how to charm a woman with the right smile, the right words. And yet, when he looked at me, there was no arrogance, no cocky bravado, just exhaustion. Adam, he asked cautiously. I nodded, stepping closer. You got a name? Brian, he said, his voice tight. He exhaled, shaking his head. Shit, man. I don't even know where to start. Start with how you met her, I said, my tone flat. He nodded, leaning against the railing, staring out at the dark water. She came into the bar I own. Regular customer. She was friendly, flirty, but nothing crazy at first. Just a woman who liked to talk, have a drink, unwind. He rubbed a hand over his jaw. Then one night, she told me she was getting divorced. Said it was mutual, that you both wanted out, but were waiting for the right time. I clenched my teeth so hard my jaw ached. She made it sound clean, Brian continued. Like it was just a matter of logistics. She told me she hadn't been in love with you for years. A sharp laugh escaped before I could stop it. The audacity. And you believed her. Brian sighed. Yeah, I did. He turned to look at me. Until I found out about the others. A chill went through me. Others? He nodded, reaching into his jacket and pulling out his phone. Ethan isn't the only one, man. She's been playing all of us. He scrolled for a moment before holding the screen up for me to see. And there it was. Messages. Photos. Conversations between Lauren and men whose names I had never heard before. Ethan. Brian. Someone named Matt. Another named Jason. Different cities. Different hotels. Different excuses. My vision blurred at the edges. Brian exhaled. I don't know how long she thought she could keep it up, but I wasn't going to be part of it anymore. He hesitated. I sent you that message. You deserve to know. I didn't speak. I couldn't. The cold realization settled in my bones. This wasn't just a single betrayal. It wasn't just one mistake. Lauren hadn't slipped up. She had built an entire life behind my back, and she had never planned on stopping. I took a slow breath, my fingers tightening into fists at my sides. The anger I had felt before was nothing compared to what was building inside me now. I turned to Brian, my voice calm, steady. You did the right thing telling me. He nodded, studying me carefully. What are you going to do? I met his gaze, the beginnings of a plan already taking shape in my mind. I'm going to take everything from her. I drove home in silence, my hands gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles ached. The streetlights blurred past, casting long shadows across the windshield. Lauren had built a world of deception around me, carefully constructed, meticulously maintained. And I had been too blind, too trusting to see it. That blindness was gone now, burned away by the weight of betrayal. She thought she had control, thought she had options. She had no idea that by morning, I would take every single one of them away. When I pulled into the driveway, the house was dark except for the soft glow of a light in the living room. I stepped inside quietly, shutting the door behind me. Lauren was curled up on the couch, still in the same clothes from earlier, scrolling through her phone like nothing had happened. Like she hadn't spent the last year living a double life. Like she hadn't shattered everything we had built together. She looked up as I entered, her expression unreadable. You were gone a while, she said, her voice cautious. Where'd you go? I didn't answer. I just stood there, studying her. How many times had she sat in that exact spot, texting one of them while I was in the next room? How many nights had she smiled at me across the dinner table, kissed me goodnight, knowing full well she was sneaking off to someone else the next chance she got? She shifted under my stare. Adam, seriously, where did you go? I walked past her, tossing my keys onto the counter. Out. She frowned, sitting up straighter. Out where? I met her gaze, holding it. Does it matter? Something flickered across her face. She knew. Maybe not how much I knew, but enough to feel the shift in the air. Look, I know you're upset. I laughed. It wasn't a real laugh. Just a short, sharp sound that made her flinch. Upset. I repeated, shaking my head. No, Lauren. Upset is what happens when someone cuts you off in traffic. This. I gestured between us. This is something else entirely. She wet her lips, setting her phone down. Adam, I held up a hand, cutting her off. Don't. Not tonight. I turned, heading for the stairs. I'm tired. It was a lie. I wasn't tired. I was wide awake, my mind working in overdrive, piecing together every move I needed to make. Because this wasn't just about anger anymore. This was war. The moment I reached the bedroom, I locked the door behind me. I sat on the edge of the bed, pulled out my phone, and started working. First, the finances. We had a shared bank account, but I had my own savings as well. I drained the joint account, moving every last cent into mine. Next, I accessed our phone plan. I went through the call logs again, screenshotting everything. Dates, times, numbers. I forwarded them to myself, making sure I had every bit of evidence I needed. Then, the house. It was in my name. Lauren had never bothered with the paperwork, always saying she trusted me to handle it. That trust was about to be her downfall. A quick call to my lawyer. Yes, at this hour, because money could make anything move faster. And within minutes, I had confirmation that I could legally have her removed from the property once divorce proceedings began. I moved on to her job. A quick search through her emails, because of course, she used the same password for everything, showed exactly what I needed. The affair wasn't just personal. It was professional. Ethan wasn't some random fling. He was her co-worker, and their messages, hidden in an email folder she thought was clever, were explicit. Attachments. Hotel confirmations. Plans for their next meeting. I forwarded those emails to her boss. Then, the final move. The one that would break her completely. I opened the drawer of my nightstand and pulled out a small envelope. The DNA test kit I had ordered days ago, when my suspicions first started gnawing at me. I had sent it off immediately, my hands shaking as I swabbed the inside of my mouth, then my son's. I hadn't checked the results. I had been too afraid of what I might find. But now I was ready. I opened the email and scrolled down, my pulse thudding in my ears. Probability of paternity, 0%. I stared at the screen, my vision tunneling. The numbers blurred, the words losing shape. And then, just as quickly, everything snapped back into sharp focus. It wasn't just the affair. She had taken everything from me. I sat there for a long time, the silence pressing in around me, until finally, I exhaled. The rage I had been holding on to so tightly settled into something colder. Resignation. Determination. Lauren had spent a year playing her game, thinking she held all the cards. By tomorrow, she would realize she had already lost. Morning came like a slow poison, creeping through the blinds, illuminating the wreckage of my marriage in the harsh light of day. I lay there for a moment, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of everything pressing down on me. Then, with a steady breath, I got up. Downstairs, Lauren moved through the kitchen like it was just another day, brewing coffee, scrolling through her phone, oblivious to the fact that her world was already crumbling beneath her feet. She barely looked up as I entered, her voice casual, too casual. You were up late. I watched her, taking in every movement, every lie disguised as normalcy. Yeah, I said simply. She took a sip of coffee, studying me over the rim of her mug. Are we going to talk about last night? I tilted my head, feigning curiosity. What about it? Her lips parted, just slightly, surprised at my indifference. She had expected anger, shouting, maybe even begging. But she wasn't ready for this. For me to be in control. Adam, come on, she sighed, setting the mug down. I don't want things to be like this. Like what? I asked, stepping closer, my tone light, conversational. Like I found out my wife has been screwing multiple men behind my back. Like she's been lying to me every single day for a year. Her eyes flickered, just for a second, before she exhaled sharply. You're being cruel. I laughed. A real laugh this time, dark and humorless. Cruel? I repeated. Lauren, I haven't even started. Her phone buzzed on the counter. She ignored it, but I didn't. I reached for it, faster than she expected, and before she could stop me, I had it in my hand. Her face drained of color. Give it back. I glanced at the screen. Ethan. Again. You should really change his name to something less obvious, I mused, flipping through her notifications. More messages. Some from numbers I didn't recognize. Some I did. One from Brian. One from Matt. Different men. Different lies. Lauren lunged for the phone, but I stepped back, holding it just out of reach. Who else, Lauren? I asked, my voice eerily calm. How many more? Adam, stop it, she snapped, her eyes flashing. You're acting insane. I'm acting sane, I corrected. For the first time in a year. I tapped the screen, opening her messages. She gasped, her hands trembling. That's private. Not anymore. I scrolled, letting the words burn into my mind. Her conversations with Ethan, with Brian, with Matt. The way she played each of them, just like she had played me. The sweet words, the promises, the way she told them all exactly what they wanted to hear. And then I found it. The conversation that changed everything. My blood ran cold as I read the words she had sent to Ethan just 2 nights ago. I'm almost ready. Just a few more weeks. Once everything is set, he won't see it coming. I lifted my gaze to hers, my pulse thudding in my ears. What exactly was I not supposed to see coming, Lauren? Her breath hitched, her mask slipping. Adam, please, don't. I cut her off, my voice dropping. Don't lie. Not anymore. Silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. Then, finally, she slumped back against the counter, pressing a hand to her forehead. I was going to leave, she admitted, her voice small. I was going to take the house, the accounts. I just needed to make sure everything was in place first. I let the words settle, let them sink in, let them burrow deep into the hollow space where love used to be. She hadn't just been cheating. She had been planning my downfall. Meticulously, deliberately. The affairs weren't just affairs. They were distractions while she built her escape, while she stripped me of everything I had worked for. And I had been blind to it. Until now. I nodded slowly, pocketing her phone. Good, I said. Then I guess it's a good thing I beat you to it. Her brow furrowed, confusion flickering across her face. What? I smiled. A slow, deliberate smile. Check your accounts. She hesitated, then grabbed her laptop from the counter. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, her eyes scanning the screen. And then she froze. No, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I watched as realization dawned, as her breath quickened, as her hands trembled. No, no, no. Yes, I said simply. She shook her head, panic flooding her expression. What did you do? I leaned against the counter, arms crossed. I made sure you got exactly what you deserved. She let out a strangled breath, clicking frantically, searching for something, anything left in her name. But she found nothing, because there was nothing left. You transferred everything? She choked out. I did. The house, mine. The accounts, empty. Her hands clenched into fists, her entire body shaking. You can't do this, she whispered. I already did. The silence between us crackled like static. She had spent a year weaving a web of lies, and in a single night, I had cut every strand. You bastard, she spat, her voice shaking with fury. You were going to take everything from me. I reminded her. I just made sure you didn't get the chance. She took a slow, shuddering breath, her eyes darting toward the stairs, toward our son's room, toward her last shred of hope. My chest tightened, but I didn't let it show. Don't, I said before she could speak. Don't even try to play the mother card. Her lips parted, a protest forming, but she must have seen the steel in my expression, because she shut her mouth just as quickly. She had lost. She knew it, and it was killing her. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. I know. 2 words. That was all it took for her to stumble back, like I had struck her. Know what? She whispered, but we both knew she already did. He's not mine, I said, the words steady, final. The last nail in the coffin. Her breath hitched. Adam, I shook my head. Don't. Tears welled in her eyes, spilling over, streaking down her cheeks. For the first time, she looked broken. Please. It was a single word, raw and desperate, but it meant nothing now. She had made her choice. She had just never expected me to make mine first. I took a step back, exhaling slowly, letting the weight of it all settle. You should start packing, I said. You've got until the end of the day. Her lips trembled. Where am I supposed to go? Not my problem. I turned away, walking toward the door, toward the fresh air, toward the life that no longer had space for her in it. And as I stepped outside, leaving her standing there, broken and beaten, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Freedom. I didn't look back. Not when I stepped outside. Not when I heard the sharp, uneven breaths behind me. Not even when I heard the muffled sound of something crashing to the floor inside. Let her break something. Let her scream. It wouldn't change anything. She had already lost. The cold morning air bit at my skin as I walked to my car, but I barely felt it. My pulse was steady, my mind clear. This wasn't rage anymore. This wasn't even revenge. This was justice. Every step I took away from that house was another step toward reclaiming what was mine. And she knew it. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out and glanced at the screen. Brian. I answered without hesitation. It's done, I said before he could speak. A pause. Then a slow exhale. Jesus. I leaned against the car, watching the house from a distance. She's in shock, I said, almost absently. She thought she was untouchable. Brian let out a low chuckle. They always do. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The weight of everything settled between us, heavy and final. I could hear the distant hum of traffic, the rustling of leaves in the wind, the faint sound of a door slamming inside the house. Lauren, coming apart at the seams. So what now? Brian finally asked. I ran a hand through my hair, exhaling slowly. Now, she realizes there's no way out. I could already picture it. The frantic calls to her bank, the desperate attempts to move money that was no longer there, the sinking realization that she had nothing left to manipulate. She had spent the last year building an escape plan, a clean getaway, a future that didn't include me. But I had erased it all in a single night. I pushed off the car. I'll call you later. Brian hesitated. You sure you're okay, man? I glanced back at the house one last time, watching as the curtains shifted upstairs. She was watching me. Of course she was. She had spent so long believing she was in control, and now she was witnessing, in real time, just how wrong she had been. Yeah, I said. I'm better than okay. I ended the call and slid into the driver's seat, gripping the wheel with steady hands. I had one last move to make. By the time I returned home that evening, the house was dark, quiet. Lauren was sitting at the kitchen table, a half-empty glass of wine in front of her, her phone clutched tightly in her hand. Her eyes were red, her face pale. She looked up as I entered, something raw and desperate flashing across her features. I have nowhere to go, she whispered. I set my keys down on the counter. Not my problem. Her fingers tightened around the stem of the glass. Adam, please. We can fix this. I laughed, shaking my head. You still don't get it, do you? I stepped closer, leaning on the counter across from her. There's nothing to fix. You made sure of that. She swallowed hard, tears slipping down her cheeks. I messed up. I tilted my head. Which part? The affair? The fact that there were multiple affairs? Or the part where you were planning to gut me financially and walk away like I was nothing? She winced. I wasn't thinking. You were thinking plenty. I corrected, my voice sharp. You were thinking when you booked hotel rooms. When you sent texts. When you made sure I never found out. You were thinking every single time you smiled at me, kissed me, climbed into our bed knowing you had been with him. With them. Her breath hitched. I didn't want to hurt you. I let out a slow, deliberate breath. No, Lauren. You just didn't want to get caught. Silence stretched between us. She was shaking now, the reality of what she had done finally settling in. I leaned in slightly. You were so sure you had everything planned. You thought you had control. I let a slow smile creep onto my face. How does it feel to lose? She sobbed, pressing a hand to her mouth. But I felt nothing. No sympathy. No remorse. Just satisfaction. I straightened, walking past her toward the stairs. Be gone by morning. She didn't argue this time. She didn't beg. She just sat there, crumbling under the weight of her own destruction. And I went to bed knowing I had won. I woke up before sunrise, my mind sharp, my body alert. There was no grogginess, no lingering haze of sleep, just the quiet clarity of a man who had already made peace with his decision. This was it. The last day Lauren would ever spend under my roof. The last morning she would ever wake up thinking she still had a chance to slither her way back into my life. I dressed slowly, deliberately, listening to the silence of the house. No sounds from the kitchen, no clinking of mugs, no quiet hum of her morning routine. She was still asleep. Or maybe she wasn't. Maybe she was just lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, dreading the moment she had to face me again. Good. By the time I made my way downstairs, I could hear faint movement from the guest room, the one she had retreated to after last night's reckoning. Drawers opening and closing. The quiet rustle of fabric. She was packing. I poured myself a cup of coffee, savoring the rich bitterness as I leaned against the counter. This was the moment I had been waiting for. Not the explosive arguments, not the dramatic accusations. This, the quiet, inevitable consequence of her own choices settling onto her shoulders. The moment she realized there was no escaping what she had done. She appeared in the doorway minutes later, looking hesitant, uncertain. The woman who had once moved through this house with effortless confidence now stood there like an intruder, like a ghost haunting the remnants of a life she had set on fire. Her suitcase was by her side, her hands gripping the handle so tightly her knuckles were white. She looked like she wanted to speak. I didn't give her the chance. You have everything? My voice was steady, calm. Her throat bobbed as she swallowed. Yeah. I nodded toward the door. Then go. A flicker of something crossed her face. Regret, maybe. Or desperation. Adam, can we just? No. I cut her off, setting my mug down with a sharp clink. We can't. She took a step forward. I know I messed up, okay? I know I. You don't get to say that. I interrupted, my tone colder now. You don't get to stand there and act like this was some accident, some mistake you just stumbled into. I stepped closer, leveling her with a look that pinned her in place. You planned this, Lauren. You built an entire life behind my back. And now you have to live with the consequences. Tears welled in her eyes. I never wanted this. I let out a short, bitter laugh. You never wanted to get caught. She flinched. Adam, please. I don't have anywhere to go. That's not my problem. She reached for me then, her fingers brushing against my wrist, a final attempt at connection, at salvaging something from the wreckage. We can fix this. We can. I pulled away, shaking my head. No, Lauren. You did this. You ended us. And now you have to live with it. Her breath came out unsteady, her shoulders shaking. She looked down, staring at the floor like it might have the answers she needed. But there were no answers. No solutions. No way out. Finally, she exhaled shakily and reached for her suitcase. Her movements were slow, hesitant, like she was waiting for me to stop her, to tell her she could stay. I didn't. I followed her to the door, watching as she stepped outside, as the reality of what was happening settled onto her like a crushing weight. She turned back, eyes searching mine for something, pity, forgiveness, anything that might mean this wasn't truly over. But all she found was a closed door. I shut it without another word, locking it behind me. Silence. For the first time in what felt like forever, I was alone. Completely, utterly alone. And I had never felt lighter. I turned back toward the house that was mine now, truly mine. No more shadows of deception lurking in the corners. No more lies hidden beneath the surface. Just me, standing in the wreckage of a life I had once built for someone who never deserved it. I let out a slow breath, rolling my shoulders back. Time to rebuild. Time to start over. Time to live.